Catastrophes, cataclysms, calamities. Disasters all, each capable of creating destruction, devastation, and many a desperate hour. Some are natural phenomena, such as tornadoes, volcanoes, and earthquakes. Then there are man-made troubles, such as war, which remind us of man's inhumanity to man. In desperate hours, we stare into the abyss and contemplate these inconvenient truths of life on Earth. In this installment, we batten down the hatches and run for dry land as we look at the damage a little water can do, or rather, a great deal of it. The European Union's flood directive defines a flood as a covering of water of land not normally covered by water. But that rather tepid description simply doesn't do justice to the terror unleashed by raging currents and flash flooding. So then, let's get down to cases. Rio de Janiero, a place celebrated in song and in the popular imagination for samba and carnival, bronzed beach bodies, and the statue of Christ the Redeemer overlooking it all. Of course, it is also known for its darker side, the grinding poverty of the favela shanty towns, for example. But in January 2011, the state of Rio de Janeiro added flash floods to its global perception. That's when a densely populated region on a steep, hilly area around 40 miles north of the city itself was inundated with torrential rains. This in turn triggered flash floods and mudslides responsible for hundreds of fatalities.
A água já está na garagem. Eu falei, meu filho, vamos arrumar um jeito de arroilar isso. Ele falou, mãe, vamos embora. O muro já está estourando, larga essa droga para ir.
Esperando passar a tempestade, porque foi como um terremoto, sacudia essa casa toda, sacudia.
Quase que eu me afoguei com ele aqui dentro da água, né? Levei ele para casa do vizinho ali, o vizinho pegou, acolheu nós dois.
The death toll made the January 2011 floods the worst ever single-day natural disaster in Brazil's history. Some of the hardest hit spots were the towns of Teresópolis and Nova Friburgo, where some 300 millimeters of rain fell in the space of just a few hours. Torrential rains come about when a storm system crossing west to east over southern Brazil sucks in a moist southerly flow of air from the Atlantic Ocean. Both rescue and aid workers and environmental building specialists all seem to agree the death toll was needlessly high. The hillside areas around Rio lacked effective early warning systems or community organizations that might have helped residents evacuate as the rains intensified.
Menos às 3:30 da manhã e começou a descer pé d'água lá de cima do morro e pessoas pedindo socorro e sem poder fazer nada, cara. A tromba d'água foi incrível.
Foi um desastre, cara. Ninguém esperava. Era um rio pequeno, não aparentava ter problema nenhum. De repente, causou um caos, aniquilou a população. Perdi 23 parentes, perdi meu pai, perdi meu filho.
Weeks after the disaster, many communities remained isolated due to heavy landslides on principal access roads. Dozens of families were thus still dependent on helicopters to deliver emergency health care and essentials like food and potable water. In Teresópolis, the townspeople cleared debris in the streets using shovels and brushes. While in Nova Friburgo, all families could do was watch and cry as their homes were demolished.
Depois dessa lição, eu acho que a fraternidade, o amor, a compaixão vão ser as bases que vão edificar esta nova Friburgo. Com a ajuda de todos, nós vamos reconstruir essa cidade.
January rains in Brazil are becoming increasingly severe, with floods becoming routine. Whether or not the heavy rains can be attributed to climate change, the fact is, urban planning has been weighed down on the Brazilian political agenda for a long time. That doesn't mean things are automatically better in the so-called First World. On the morning of August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast of the United States. The city of New Orleans was one of the most badly affected areas. Technically speaking, although about half of New Orleans is actually above sea level, the Big Easy is completely surrounded by water, and its average elevation, to use the technical term, is about 6 feet below. At different times over the course of the 20th century, the Army Corps of Engineers had built a system of levees and seawalls that were meant to keep the city from flooding. Some of the levees, especially those along the Mississippi River, stood strong in 2005. But those intended to hold back Lake Pontchartrain, Lake Bourne, and the swamps and marshes to the city's east and west were nowhere near as robust. Floodwaters seeped through the soil under some of the levees and swept others away completely. Soon, low-lying places, such as the now infamous 9th Ward, were under so much water, people scrambled to their attics or even rooftops for safety. Mayor Ray Nagin declared that the Superdome, a downtown sports stadium located on relatively high ground, would serve as a shelter of last resort for people who could not leave the city. In effect, that meant the poorest people of New Orleans. Conditions in the overcrowded Superdome were soon less than hygienic, with food and water in short supply. Lawlessness and looting spread throughout the city. The National Guard was mobilized to restore law and order in what quickly became a hostile and unsafe environment. Tensions ran high, and many felt vulnerable.
We could go and help in tsunami, but we can't help our own people. We've been sleeping in the street for 5 days and nights.
If you're sleeping at nighttime, you got a handful of canned goods, people trying to come in and get them. You know, I look at it this way, it's like a battle zone, you know.
Something like 1 million people were made homeless by Katrina, with around 1,200 people drowning in the floodwaters. There was much criticism of the authorities for their handling of the disaster. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, took days to establish operations in New Orleans, and even then did not seem to have a sound plan of action. But criticism went all the way to the highest office in the land.
The country stands with you. We'll do all in our power to help you.
His handling of the disaster left a mark on George Bush's presidential legacy. And in a telling footnote, former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin was indicted and imprisoned in 2014 for 20 of 21 charges of wire fraud, bribery, and money laundering, spanning his 2 terms as mayor, including, of course, Katrina. On a certain level, the causes of flooding are easy to wrap your head around. Floods are caused by an imbalance of the hydrological system, the pattern in which water circulates from the clouds to the soil, then to bodies of water such as rivers and oceans, and then back to the clouds. When more water flows through the hydrological system than it has capacity for, then floods are the result. That imbalance is most often the result of torrential rain, with rivers, streams, or reservoirs overflowing due to unusually high rainfall. But also factors such as excess water from melting snow or ice jams in rivers. Essentially, there are 2 types of floods. One is river flooding, where, just as it sounds, water spills over the edges of a river. The other is the flash flood, and is far more dangerous, responsible for the majority of fatalities and large-scale destruction associated with floods. Flash floods occur when a wall of water rapidly sweeps over an area. Another factor causing floods is urbanization. By replacing grass and dirt with concrete, such as buildings, roads, and parking lots, there is insufficient soil to soak up rainwater. When it does overflow, the result is an inconvenience at best, disaster at worst. So rainfall that would be absorbed in a rural area can cause calamity in an urban environment. The need to do something about this problem and threats to the environment in general is something that has slowly but surely gained acceptance worldwide.
Una actitud solamente, lo digo en buen sentido, verde, entre comillas. No es una actitud verde, es mucho más. Es decir, cuidar el ambiente significa una actitud de ecología humana.
But as the old saying goes, fine words butter no parsnips. The race to do something about the melting polar ice caps, which could cause massive flooding, unknown before in recorded history, is like a race against a doomsday clock. We are, potentially, dying by inches.
In these years, it's contributing this much every year to sea level rise. And then you think, well, this is not that much. But if you have 10 years, and all of a sudden it's that much, and then you get more global warming, perhaps, and it goes faster and faster. And in general, people don't need to be concerned about the Greenland ice sheet because it will be around for a long time. But even if 1/10 of it would melt in the following 100 years, then there will be huge cities, a large share of the population of the world that will get in trouble because of this sea level rise.
Half a century ago, a massive flood affected whole swathes of Germany's coastal regions, and in particular, the city of Hamburg. This was around the time the Beatles were paying their dues in Hamburg's nightclubs, but that's another story.
This is what it looks like, mile upon mile of flood, thousands of homes isolated. With railways underwater and other communications cut, rescue work has been made doubly difficult.
The North Sea flood of 1962 destroyed over 60,000 houses, and the death toll came to 315. Many of the lucky survivors of the North Sea floods would later refer to the military rescue helicopters as the Flying Angels. Interesting to note, this was the first such crisis in Germany since the Second World War in which army personnel and machinery were deployed in such numbers. If you want to define the difference between a disaster and a tragedy, there's an inevitability about a disaster, whereas a tragedy is something that was caused by or could have been avoided were it not for human error. In mid-June of 2013, flash floods and their resulting landslides killed thousands and made many more homeless in the Uttarakhand state and region of northern India. Many of those killed were Hindu pilgrims visiting the Kedarnath shrine. High up in the mountains, it is said that Lord Shiva moved there to be away from the things of man.
हाँ बेटा, कैसे बच्चों के बिना कैसे जाऊं? मेरी तबीयत सही नहीं है।
बाल बच्चा लेकर के रास्ता में है, वो क्या करेगा? हम लोग बहुत तकलीफ में है।
आप देख ही रहे हैं बाढ़ किस हिसाब से जो है प्रभावित कर रहा है जनता को।
It was a multi-day cloudburst with driving rain which caused the destructive and lethal floods and landslides. Though other regions of India experienced the flood, and parts of western Nepal and western Tibet were subject to heavy rainfall, the vast majority of the casualties occurred in Uttarakhand. Of course, there wasn't much local officials could have done about the cloudburst. But hundreds of thousands of Hindu pilgrims make the journey to Uttarakhand's temple towns every summer. The hills are also a popular place to go to escape the scorching summer heat. But most tourists leave in July, the start of monsoon season. Only in 2013, the rains started early. Environmental activists said landslides had been made worse due to the unchecked development of the region. Many others complained that the government's relief efforts had been slow and uncoordinated, despite flooding being a regular occurrence.
परेशानी ये है कि पानी के लिए कोई सुविधा नहीं है, खाने वाने भी कुछ भी नहीं आया, टेंट वेंट कुछ भी नहीं, ऐसे रोड पे सामान पड़ा हुआ है हमारा।
मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि कुल सारे प्रयत्नों के बाद भी जितना त्वरित गति से प्रशासकीय ढंग से अशासकीय ढंग से जो काम होना चाहिए संभवतः वो हम लोग नहीं कर पाए। तो दूसरी बात है कि पिछले वर्ष के जो दुर्घटना हुई थी उस दुर्घटना से हमने कुछ सीखा ही नहीं, और कुछ सीख करके हमने पिछली बार ही कहा था कि बहुत सी जगह ऐसी हैं कि जहाँ कभी भी क्लाउड बस्ट हो सकता है। ऐसे 233 गांव तो पहले से ही मार्क हैं कि जो कभी भी जहाँ कैलेमिटी आ सकती है, आपदा आ सकती है, लेकिन सरकार ने उस ओर ध्यान ही नहीं दिया।
Some 100,000 pilgrims and tourists were trapped for days in the valleys leading to Hindu pilgrimage sites because of the damage done to roads and bridges. On December 26, 2004, millions of people awoke from their post-Christmas Day slumber to horrifying news out of Southeast Asia. It began in the depths of the Indian Ocean with a 9.0 magnitude earthquake. According to the US Geological Survey, the energy it released was equivalent to that of 23,000 Hiroshima-sized atomic bombs. Could be forgiven for thinking of the 2005 tsunami not as an earthquake, but as a series of tidal waves. However, a tsunami is not the same thing as a tidal wave. It's a series of destructive ocean waves triggered by an underwater earthquake, landslide, volcanic eruption, or, we'd better hope, not anytime soon, by the impact of a giant meteor plunging into the sea. But such distinctions wouldn't have seemed very important to anyone caught up in the 2005 tsunami.
Habis gempa itu jam 9 kan? Jam 9 habis gempa ada sekitar 15 menit entah, pas setengah jam lah kan turun air kering.
Rooms filled up within 30 seconds, first of all to about 3 foot, and then we all got out of the rooms, and then one of our friends has had to go to the hospital. We couldn't get out of the room. He woke up and was asleep on his bed, lying woke up in water. Had to throw the TV through the window to climb out.
Hundreds of thousands were killed in minutes, and millions lost their homes as wave after destructive wave crashed into the coastlines of some 11 Indian Ocean countries. With ruthless efficiency, the waves dragged people out to sea, drowned others on the beach or in their homes, and demolished property on an unimaginable scale. In low-lying areas of western coastal Sumatra, including the city of Banda Aceh, virtually the entire population of 300,000 was affected in one way or another. Aid workers from across the globe rushed to help as soon as they could, but the scale and ferocity of the destruction was overwhelming.
The destruction and the stuff that I've seen here is much more horrific than anything I've seen in combat.
The scale of the 2005 tsunami is still hard to comprehend. A study by the World Bank estimated the cost of the destruction of property and businesses in Sumatra alone at more than $4.4 billion. More than 10 years later, and relief and recovery efforts in affected areas are still ongoing. Rains will fall and riverbanks will burst. But retaining walls can be built, and urban planning should ensure waterways are not blocked, plus drainage systems should be regularly cleared of litter and debris. Natural disasters will be with us for a long time to come. But the death and destruction caused by Brazilian floods and landslides, the flooding after Hurricane Katrina, and the northern Indian floods could all have been reduced by environmental awareness in building codes, better coordinated relief efforts, and so on. Après moi le déluge, or after me the flood, as French King Louis XV once said, in what is seen as the ultimate in irresponsible attitude. It's like so many of the environmental issues that confront us. Prevention will always be better than a cure.